Hello, my name is Sean, and I'm going to be walking through the benchmark organizational design structure and change presentation on Coinbase Global. So Coinbase is a cryptocurrency exchange that primarily deals in trading assets as well as holding it on their app. It was founded in June 2012 by Brian Armstrong and Fred Ehrsam. It used to be headquartered in the Silicon Valley area of California, but since COVID, it has been wholly remote. So it's a wholly remote company with people all over the country and world. As I previously stated, it is in the cryptocurrency industry, and it's also the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the United States. In 2021, it had $7.8 billion in revenue, 3.1 billion in net income, and it had just under 100 million users in 2022. The last headcount of its employees were US-based were 3,730. So let's go back and talk a moment about why we are doing this presentation. We are doing this presentation to compare a specific company up to the standards of what Fortune comes out with their most admired companies. Fortune bases their most admired companies' metrics on 8 qualities. It's innovativeness, its quality of management, its long-term investment value, and its social responsibility to the community environment. It also does scores on people management, quality of product and services, its financial soundness, and its wise use of corporate assets. So why did I choose Coinbase, and how does Coinbase, in my mind, stack up to these metrics? So this next slide is going to show you how I view and what I've done on my research, kind of where Coinbase aligns. Green is good, yellow is okay, and red is bad. And that's what the red area is going to be primarily what we focus in on this presentation. So it has good innovativeness. Cryptocurrency is it's a new industry, it's a hot commodity, and it's based on Next, we're going to talk about its financial soundness, and that's the main problem. Since the interest rates have started to go up for Coinbase, it has been a very precarious situation which Coinbase finds itself on, and it's so precarious that it really could even end up in bankruptcy. So this is what I'm going to be focusing on the majority of the next 8 to 10 slides, and we'll get a little bit into the weeds after the next topic, which is the wise use of corporate assets. As of right now, they are trying to scale back their financial problems that they're in. For example, they completely removed their real estate footprint and have gone to a completely remote system. So for the time being, it has a pretty good use of its corporate assets. Now, next, let's go into the following slide. So why am I focusing on Coinbase's financial soundness? And the reason why is, as of recently, the stock has plummeted 73% compared to its IPO back in April of last year. It started out got to almost $500, in a sense, gone all the way down to $65.50. And it really can show that it's going to go down even farther because they really haven't found a base yet. Next, in June of 2022, as a result of this massive nosedive, the company's employees, 18% of them were laid off, and a lot of them didn't even know they were laid off until the morning on when they tried to log onto the computer and they were locked out. Next is, since these layoffs, the work-life balance has been very stressful for the retained employees, and they're now expected to work longer nights with very little chance of having any sort of bereavement or get out of the monotony that they're into right now. Additionally, they've had a decent amount of lawsuits piled on, and this is creating additional expenses for the company. And there's a lot of pending lawsuits for the company that could end them if it goes in the defendant's way. And the reason why they're getting these lawsuits is because there's been reports of insider trading by managers, and this is a massive problem that we're going to get into, and we're going to find out, this already alludes to, this has not been a conscious capitalist approach to a company that really can make a lot of change, especially in a new and emerging industry. Lastly is, Coinbase has already warned that if a bankruptcy does happen, some of its customers could end up losing some of their investments that they placed in it, and that's a problem because The point of the app is to store the customer's assets, not to play around with it and waste it. So this is why these are some of the major points of why we decided to focus in on the financial soundness of this company. So let's talk about some of the ramifications, consequences, and effect on the organizational structure. So, as we said, all these stressful conditions that have been thrusted upon the employees has really led to a lot of organizational stress. And this stress often leads to a decline in the work and the quality, and a drop in productivity for company. So organizational stress is essentially stress placed on a person because of the company that they're working for. There's been a lot of swirl going around with Coinbase. They've been losing a lot of money. There's been a lot of unannounced layoffs. It's creating a lot of stress on employees. And this in turn is almost a vicious cycle, because then the employees get more stressed out. They work longer hours. They're going to, have declines in their health potentially. They're going to have declines in their relationships outside of work potentially. And they're going to, kind of get an aversion to the company culture that Coinbase is trying to build. And that's a problem. The next is, they've had a complete lack of financial management. And this has led to negative organizational assumptions. So, what I mean by that is this company was born in the Silicon Valley, and they've had an almost endless supply of investor money. So once they went public, the problem is they just kept assuming that they could continue the same company lifestyle, free lunches, high benefits, high wages, which is a good thing, but when they didn't have the money coming in, it led to a quick and fast burnout with 18% of the employees being lost, with a lot of regulations coming down farther on them. And it's now being very closely watched by its shareholders, which sometimes can be more of a negative consequence, because shareholders like to see short-term value and don't really want to see a lot of long-term value when the company's struggling, or at least that's not what they're focused on at the present. Next is it's really had a lack of transparency and communication during difficult times like what they're going through now, and the legal actions against some of the managers that have been arrested. It's going to demoralize and unmotivate a lot of the employees, especially with an opaque system and not a lot of upfront, this is what's happening, this is how we're going to change, and this is how we can be better. Furthermore, some of these unethical decisions by the management team has already resulted in a little bit more of a toxic workplace. And, you're probably thinking, what did these managers do? And they did insider trading. And insider trading not only hurts the company and the brand, it hurts the employees, because a lot of this financial hardships that have hit the company through lawsuits result in, more employees being let go. And not only that, but it's going to hurt the customers because they're going to have less trust in the company. And it's going to hurt the whole industry as a whole, because insider trading is meant to make a few people money and exclude the rest and even hurt the rest. Next is, there have already been a lot of tradable assets on Coinbase that has been removed from the platform because after being listed, there's been potential fraud. There's been SEC complaints about some of the assets, and it basically means that right now Coinbase needs to be more invested in vetting the assets that they list on their exchanges to make sure that they are a good fit for the customers and a good fit for the industry as a whole. They are the gatekeepers to cryptocurrency, so they need to make sure that what is presented to the employees is safe, and all the information about the companies are upfront to the employees and to the customers, so they can see, this is what I'm getting myself into. Last is, the current organizational structure is very decentralized. It's all remote. So it makes it difficult to instill a meaningful and ethical culture for the company. So any change, can't take place in a building because they don't have a headquarters. Everyone's out all across the country. And this isn't necessarily a big negative. It just makes it more challenging when they're trying to change the current culture to make it a little bit more fiscally conservative, a little bit more, focused on ethics, or a lot more focused on ethics. And, how can we get there? So with all the talk about what has happened with the company, now let's talk what's its current fate with conscious capitalism. And as of right now, it's not good. They have some redeeming factors, but for the majority and what's been happening mostly outweighs the good. So the current company culture and financial mismanagement does not fit well with conscious capitalist approach, as the current culture does not value all the stakeholders, not just the shareholders, but the employees, the community, the industry that it's in. Next is they've had a lot of poor communication and a lack of transparency, and this has kind of created a culture of secrecy and an overall fear of more stress, more organizational stress to be specific. Next is the company managers are not leading by example and have even committed fraud, hurting the community, shareholders, and company's brand. When you have managers committing felonies, this is not going to bode well for the new hire employees. It's going to scare a lot of people away. So, the manager's unethical practice points towards a culture that is not currently compatible with the servant leadership and conscious capitalism that has been taught in this class. Next is they've had a lot of mass layoffs recently, and this has led to a discouraged workforce who have been overburdened with the work from those who have been let go. And the way a lot of these employees have been let go was not ethical. It may have been legal, but it was not ethical because they found out the morning of with trying to log into their work. There was no communication about this could have been happening, and to allow the people who may have been affected to start kind of like playing the field and seeing if they could find other jobs. Lastly is, all this financial mismanagement could even result in a potential bankruptcy. And this would hurt everyone. This would hurt the shareholders, the employees, the cryptocurrency industry, everyone as a whole. And that's dangerous because you got to remember is that the whole point of a company is to help build up those around you, as well as being financially successful to continue in the industry. This is why the current company Coinbase is not fitting well with the conscious capitalist approach. So how are we going to fix this how are we going to fix this? And the proposed improvement plan is utilizing the continuous change model process. So they need to constantly be thinking, how can we change? How can we be for the better? And they need to realize the force for change. And they need to be able, and the force for change is staying an economically viable company that's now going to be based very heavily on the ethical decisions, more so at a manager level. Next is they need to recognize and define the problem. Management needs to acknowledge that in the past, they've done a lot of aggressive spending, and it's hurt its investors and most of all the employees because through its aggressive spending and aggressive hiring habits in 2021 and 2020 or 2020 and 2021, the employees have had to pay the brunt by the force for it because through the layoffs. Next is they have to have a problem-solving process. So some of this could be they got to identify some high-spending areas and reduce those. Next is they need to implement a lot of ethical training classes, specifically with the management, with the managers, to kind of instill in them that this is a new industry. There's a lot of eyes on them, and they need to make sure they're doing it by the book and they're doing it correctly. And what may benefit them doesn't always mean it's going to be benefiting the wider group. Next is, they need to get pledges from management that if any layoffs are going to be happening in the future, that they got to give warnings. They got to be an open book. They got to communicate with the employees and maybe use a little bit of the human relations management approach and see if some employees have good ideas to help reduce spending that might not result in layoffs. Next is they need to implement the change, and how they're going to implement the change is unfreezing the current culture and implementing the identified process in the previous box. Lastly is after they do all this, and most importantly, they have to measure and evaluate. So they have to measure and evaluate what they've done and is it's working. If it's working, good. If it's not, this is the whole point of the change model process. They need to then create a different force for change and a new problem solving process. And next, after they get this company culture changed, they need to refreeze it and reinforce that this culture is not going to change. So you have to get used to it. So next, let's continue a little bit on this. The management needs to focus on a hiring process that is not dependent on boom and bust cycles to help retain current and existing talent. One of the things that helped lead to its financial mismanagement is that they just hired like crazy in 2020 and 2021, assuming that the economy that was taking place over the past 2 years was going to continue into the far future. They need to reanalyze their hiring process and make sure that they're not overburdening themselves with employees who could be working at other jobs that are a lot more secure just for a short-term gain. Next is they also got to utilize the employees in the company culture early in their onboarding process. It's a remote company. They need to find a way to really incentivize the group. Like, this is our new company culture. It's ethically based. It's based on conscious capitalism. Uh, and they have to find a way to do it virtually. Next is they got to emphasize a healthy social learning. So social learning is essentially where people observe behaviors of others and adapt to their own time. Since it's going to be a fully remote company, they need to understand that they need to find a way that works well in a virtual setting where they can utilize managers that have had a good track record of ethics and put them up in front of the new people and say, this is someone that you need to follow because the the culture that they are abiding by is what the culture of the company is going to be in the future. Lastly, is they need to adopt a broader stakeholder perspective to reinforce the company's culture, corporate social responsibility, by essentially reviewing the listed asset by reviewing the currently listed assets on its trading platform. And why is that going to help all the shareholders and stakeholders? Is because it helps the shareholders by protecting the brand and the integrity of the company. It helps the employees because a protected brand is going to help retain their jobs and create more opportunity for them as the company expands in a healthy manner. Next, it's going to help the customers because the customers are going to feel confident knowing that whatever they invested on the company is not a scam. And lastly, it's going to help the community industry as a whole, is because there's a lot of scam that's currently taking place in the cryptocurrency market, and they need those gatekeepers to be as effective as possible on making sure no scams, no Ponzi schemes makes it onto this platform. So how are they going to manage the existing and future challenges? Well, they're going to need to be communicated in very transparent and open ways and use the human relations theory to help leverage knowledge from the employee base. Employees want to help the company that they work for, especially when they're incentivized and they've bought into the company culture. An open, transparent management base will help instill the culture that is going to be implemented in the near future. And by reaching out to them and saying, hey, whatever theories you guys have or ideas that might help the company, like, bring it to us. Like, everyone's ideas can be valid. Show a little bit of that inclusivity. Next is they need to focus on an inclusive and open hiring process that's going to promote diversity to encourage more innovative ideas and help turn around the company's bottom line and culture. It's been showed consistently through the past that a more diverse company is going to be more innovative, which will help continue to keep the edge of Coinbase and allow it to retain spot as the #1 cryptocurrency asset or trading platform in the United States. Next, they need to focus on reinforcing the ethical decision-making that stresses creative value for all stakeholders. So everyone, not just the shareholders, such as customers, employees, community. And the company, last and first and foremost, is companies got to focus on ethical decision-making and make sure that whatever they do, is based on an ethical, conscious capitalist approach and not get into silly things like insider trading. Last is they need to focus on resolving vertically induced conflict to help reduce the stress a lot of these employees are facing right now. Because structural intervention should be focused on constructive task conflict and addressing the sources of the conflict between the employees and the management. For Coinbase, it's a lack of transparency. It's a lot of, out of the blue layoffs, and it's the overburdening of work that they're instilling on the employees. All these needs to change to make sure that this company survives into the future and how it can help kind of onboard that conscious capitalist approach that we want to see. Finally, let's talk about some of the leadership strategies for the team and for the collaboration going forward. So the most important leadership strategy that they're going to have to work on is the virtual leadership strategy. And unfortunately, the virtual leadership strategy focuses on less day-to-day interaction with employee because they're all over the world in the country. So since this is a relatively new field, they're going to have to partner with a lot of the modern organizational leadership that's around in the country, researchers and the higher up Coinbase managers, so they can help frame the appropriate issues in questions regarding virtual leadership and find effective ways to convey culture of the company to the employees. Next is they need to be able to utilize the Harrison-Blanchard theory for the managers, because this is going to encourage a varied response based on the readiness of the followers. And what does that mean? Is that when they're implementing this change, they're going to need to be able to take almost like a pulse of the room and see how they are reacting to the change. If they're not as enthusiastic, the managers are going to have to work really hard and really effectively to get buy-in from the employees, which are one of the stakeholders. If the change comes and the employees are completely bought into the concept because they know the change needs to come, then the manager should take a little bit more of a hands-off approach and just slightly guide them towards the right direction. Doing all of this can help turn Coinbases around, and a healthy organizational structured company will eventually lead to better bottom line and help turn around its financial mismanagement that's currently been known for. And with that, that is the end of the presentation. So please feel free to respond with any questions, and I hope you enjoyed.